I'm very tired because I haven't slept last night, but I just watched the video about morality by the two guys. I don't remember what their channels are called, uh, but I think when you talk about morality, that of course it's important not to leave out other sciences and um, how and the importance and the I'm very tired. The not questioning uh, the validity or the um, I can't see myself. That's also a bit confusing. Well, but when I think about morality, I first think about an Australian uh, some I don't know if he's a professor, but he has some theories about how humans have acted in relation to each other, and I think what he says is that that uh, people have acted morally towards each other, taking care of children, and I think that when I think more about it, I think that the human race would have been extinct. Is that the right word? If human beings, when human beings were uh, Neanderthals or whatever it's called, uh, if they were not able to take care of their children's children. And when you talk about the brain, um, all our emotions, feelings are situated in the brain, and that's why everything we experience will always be subjective. I've studied peda, peda, okay, when you work with children, you uh, learn things about um children, and I made these observations that I had to put into words, describing what I saw. And firstly, you will notice how difficult it is to say that this is objectivity, that everyone else, apart from me, would see the same and notice the same, write the same things, because our view views as humans on life are different. What we focus on are different things, because our values, our backgrounds, everything that we have experienced form who we are. And that means that when I watched this little guy who had cerebral paralysis, I don't know how to say it in English, uh, I would focus on uh, certain, um, for example, social situations or some emotional outbursts, or how he functioned in groups and things like that. And my focus, even in those different areas, would be on specific subjects within those qualities. So, if another person with a different background were was to watch, observe, and describe, uh, then it would be different focuses. So objectivity is very hard to obtain as being a part of the human race. Uh, and also, when you think about philosophy, when you describe the world, uh, and you take off all these layers of what we have, uh, our values, and what we appreciate in life. For example, the boys talk about well being, which I needed to get defined. the concept of well-being, because if you think about Maslow and the needs that you need to get fulfilled in life, are those basic needs? Is that well-being, or does it have more layers of needs, and how many layers should it contain, and is that different from people living in Africa and me living in Denmark, and even different within different groups in the various countries? uh, so values and uh, I lost. What was I saying? Well, objectivity, I'll return to that. Okay, philosophy. That's when you describe reality. I think that's what they try to describe. What is reality? If you take out the human beings and say, what's left then with all our values and what we put into life, our need for love and family, money, whatever, what's left then? And when one of the guys says that morality will be there, uh, it's not something that's subjective, but it's an objective truth. I think that's what he said at one point. Then there would have to be a God if all human beings were disappeared from Earth, and for morality still to exist. I don't think the trees would talk about morality, or the sky. I think it would be a more moral world without human beings. We wouldn't cut down trees, but then it would be the absence of human actions, and not actions that it would be everything would be at a different pace, and trees would be left alone, and so if morality should be an objective truth, then God would have to still be there, saying that there are no human beings, but the morality is this and that, because who else should define morality? It can't be nature or the sky. Well, if there are aliens out there, it could be, but okay. So then one of the other. Did I leave out? Okay. What I was trying to say before was that the concept morality, I think it appeared before religion, because that was in year 0 that Jesus was born, and all this around that time that the Bible was written. But before that, there's a long history of people having pain or being in pain for some reason or the other. Teeth problems. They didn't get that old way back in time, maybe 32 or something like that. And then, of course, when you see, well, I'm in pain, I would like other people to help me. Okay, then maybe I should help other people as well. And that dependence on people in the social group that they belong to would create the concept of morality, maybe not from goodness in people, but from a need and not to suffer, or not a need, but the feeling of suffering being a bad thing, and not suffering being a good thing. So because they could feel the pain, and I think the sadomasochistic movement appeared much later, and maybe it was not. It was a sadist that created it. I don't know, but not thinking about that, I think that most people, and that's where the concepts of um, objectivity and subjectivity um, come. Uh, I in the get back in the picture, or how to say it. um, because well, I don't. I think most people don't like to be in pain, and in 2022, we can say that there are things that a lot of people agree on being good or bad, because we couldn't have an existing society if we didn't have agreed upon values and morality of some sort that hopefully uh, stay or get better, hopefully. Um, but if the people were in pain, maybe if they had pain in a tooth, then they would maybe need someone to pull it out, or whatever they uh, realized helped on the pain. Maybe they found out that eating these leaves would help, and then if they were in pain, they couldn't go out and get the leaves, then they would like someone else to do that for them. And of course, they would do the same for the other person. So I think that being dependent on each other in a group, belonging to a group, finding out, oh, I'm in pain, you help me, uh, I feel better, then I help you, and you feel better. That's good. Like God creating the world, and He created that, and He saw that is good. You can almost imagine these primitive um, tribes realizing these things um, from experience. You say learning by doing, that's often a very good thing. Also, when you go to school and you don't just sit and read books, but you have these role plays, or you get these experiences in real life. Maybe you hear a song and you go to, or you hear a musical and you go to the theater to watch the musical, or whatever practical elements you can uh, uh, support your teachings with, that makes it more vivid and more um like the teachings are not just passive uh, knowledge, or knowledge, depending on who you ask, uh, but something that's actively integrated in your brain as something you have uh, um, some kind of experience with, uh, that, yeah. Um, so I think those primitive tribes also, maybe a child or more children died, and they found out, they cried, and maybe they didn't understand their emotions. Why is this water running out my eyes? But they could feel, uh, and those feelings, well, we know that they're in the brain. Uh, they could feel that's not good. So I have to take care of my children not to feel this way, and it could be that primitive at that point, when they didn't have the same vocabulary, they didn't know sciences, they didn't know about psychology, biology, medical science, sociology, and anthropology, and all the other sciences, physics, and whatever, uh, because they, from where they were, they had to define, and that came gradually. Who are we? And they didn't even have the conscious thought about having to define, or and in the beginning not the vocabulary to discuss these things, and they would maybe see the sun as God watching and all the stars as eyes or whatever, and the trees being alive, and also plants, and dark places in the night as something to fear, because there could be something they didn't know what was, and they could make some or create some images in their heads. I think the world looked very different. Now we have defined this world. We have chosen the sciences to be our truth in this human life, and it's an agreed upon thing that the sciences are the truth, and you can discuss certain sciences. Others you can try to discuss with your doctor, but it's not that easy when the doctor has been studying medicine for so many years, and except if you start reading all the books about medicine, and then it would be easier to participate in a discussion. But morality, we all have some kind of relationship, if you can say it that way, in our lives to the concept of morality. What do we think is morally okay and not okay? And well, then after all human beings had evolved, and not much, I've heard, and experienced all these emotions and group dependencies, and how they would take care of their health and live longer, and define how do we treat each other, maybe not written down in a contract signed, but just that was how they treated each other, because they found out that they would like to be treated that way themselves. Then in year 0, when Jesus was born, there was already that pre-history, that's not the beginning of humanity and the beginning of time. It goes way further back. So the Bible was written at that time with the truths that defined who they were and what they believed in, and how they defined the good life and happiness, morality. I already said that, didn't I? So to think that religion, here the Bible, would be the beginning of morality would be really strange. I know things can have changed, because I know I've seen some history programs on TV about Poseidon. No, what's it called? I don't remember. What's the name of that place where there was a volcano or some earthquakes and people had to get away, and but it seemed like a civilized place where they made wine, and they took the boats or the ships to sail out, and they bought and sold, and they had this kind of restaurant, and there were some people who had more power than others, and they assumed there could have been slaves in the basement, but uh, and some horse uh, in a room with some writings and words on the walls, and children uh, being left on their own, as far as I remember, more than. But when I think about children's, the psychology of children in the 1800s, I think it was, there was, I don't remember his name. There's been different theories, and I know that I think in the 1800s, or maybe earlier also, of course, children were supposed to be dressed like adults, act like adults, and they were not viewed as children who uh, had the right to a childhood. It came much later when we found out that how children develop, and that they have certain rights, and also hitting children uh, at some time. Uh, I think in the 80s here in Denmark, because I know some teachers who hit a girl in our class, and it uh, he was not, or those teachers were not allowed to do that. So I think it was in the 80s in Denmark that right to hit children disappeared. Uh, so I was lucky, born in 73. Uh, um, so things change as suddenly someone realized, oh, children are sensitive creatures who need to be um, um, to be some people view children as plants who need to get water to grow and become a beautiful plant, um, and it's not always been like that. Like morality, like medical science, there also were the witches who had different. They used plants to. Some of them I've read to try to treat different illnesses, um, and the medical. Oh, and the no the way we define our world as based on science, that's one way we could, and we have uh, uh, make the world we live in, or define it according to these different sciences. It could have been that we thought that medication was not good for us, to put all these uh, medicaments in our bodies that have a lot of side effects that maybe create other illnesses, and that we thought that was almost like poison, and that healing like in a more magical way, because maybe we had held on to believing that the sun was the big eye watching us, and all the stars were eyes watching us out there, like God, and that all this magical that looking out on the sky with all the stars and not knowing what is out there, and it's so huge, and it's very magical when you think about it. If you don't just see a black and then dots on it, and uh, but you think about how magical and how crazy that is, that we are floating around on this ball with other balls floating around, and in this uh, orbit, I think it's called, uh, circling around the sun, and and other stars out there, other formations of stars do the same, and we don't know what's out there, and how did we end up here in this big black eternity on this ball, not knowing why we're here. It's so magical. So we could have based the what we call medicine on just healing, and we could have taken that far, created all kinds of crazy healing methods based on magic and our connection with stars and the universe, like The Secret. Not and saying we are not allowed to put any kind of pills that can give us side effects in our bodies. If we do that, we will get we will have to pay the state some money because we did something wrong, and we could also think that reflecting on things like I'm sitting here talking about this is meaningless. That why should we do that? Why not just live our lives and go out and take a walk in the forest, talking about the flowers and what we see around us, instead of focusing on what we think and trying to be clever in the eyes of others and thinking that it's embarrassing if we say something stupid, and that could be something that we didn't see as a value, thinking too much about why this and that, and what do you think about this and that, and because we know we can't know about all sciences, so it will always be a very tiny part of some kind of truth that may not even be the truth. There may be doctors saying that, why are you talking about this? We have the brain and all is controlled by these, what happens in the body, between the body and brain, when it comes to subjectivity, objectivity, and when it comes to what we see, how we perceive the world, and all of those things that we... So it's much more complicated than we sometimes think when we try to define and discuss things on a high academic level. We can study one subject and leave out everything else, and then it becomes just something that could be true, but most likely is not. And also what I'm talking about, I don't know about those ancient tribes. There's a lot of knowledge about how they lived and what tools they used and how they treated this and that. And there are some remains from that time that I know nothing about. I don't know much about the brain, like no one does, actually. So talking about the medical science, it's also, you can't say that is it the truth or not. Is it something we all should agree on as being something good? Well, it depends on what area of the body. If it's the brain, we don't know enough. So trying to say that there's some kind of science on the psychological and the psychiatric in those areas, that is a lie, because we don't know enough about the brain yet to. It's actually like me sitting here talking about this and that without knowing much about it. But when it comes to blood, the doctors know a lot because they have taken out blood, they have um, found out what different things the blood consists of. They have analyzed all the blood samples, and they have found out, there are different blood types, and there has to be this and that much of this and that for the body to function well. So that's much easier. You can take out the brain from a human being, but still it's not the same as trying to examine what's going on in a living brain. And it's more complicated, complex, I have heard, and that's still the truth. So we when they create these medicaments for psychiatric diagnosis that they have made up, then it's not actually scientific, but it's more scientific to treat a broken leg, because you can see, you can make an X-ray, see the bone growing back together, and then you can actually feel when you stand up, you can walk again, and then nothing's wrong, and that worked. But you see psychiatric patients feeling awful, even though they get medication, they get a lot of side effects, they get fatter, they feel tired, they don't have a natural feeling of hunger. Maybe they're hungry all the time, and they feel that some parts of the brain is put to sleep, like when they take the medication and things like that. So you can ask yourself, what's best, being like living dead, or not taking that medication. And you can have to, because you have some feelings that you can't control, or it makes you feel so bad that you can't function. Then you will have to choose between shit and puke. We have a different expression in Denmark. I just don't know how to say it. Blah 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 blah. So discussions are always much broader. They have a broader perspective and include so much more than people will ever know. One person, well, some persons read they just sit and read all the time, all day long, and then they become these people, I think, that who can talk about all kinds of subjects. But then you can ask yourself, was that a good life? And well, if it helps the human race, it might be. But I think most people are not able to have a real intelligent conversation or discussion on, for example, morality and how it has developed through time, and is it and then what is the good life, and yeah, some things we can say. We live in this society, then we can say, what are the problems now with morality, and we can try to solve things through discussion on that subject. That and then it seems meaningless what I have done going back, but maybe not, because I try to say that it's more complex. But if we want to talk about it today, we cannot say that there is no agreed upon morality and it doesn't exist. Well, it does, because we have a system that says that there is some kind of morality that we have to live by in order not to go to prison or whatever. So if we want the discussion, I think, and for it to make sense, if we don't have the knowledge to go back a long, long time, then it should focus on what we need to solve in our time, and then discussing those matters and why this moral decay, if there is as such, I think there is, and how do we solve it, and why this moral decay, and how can we rebuild the morality, and or redefine or justify morality in our atheistic society. Well, a lot of people are. I'm not, but there's a lot of people who don't believe in a higher truth or something divine. Blah blah. I could keep talking, but I've talked for an hour. Oh my gosh.